Hey, and welcome back to another Checkpoint Extra edition of the Average Joe Nerdcast. I'm Nate, your resident nostalgia archaeologist, and the guy who once believed virtual reality would be a thing we all use daily by like 2003. Spoilers, we got Facebook goggles and a migraine instead. But back in the 90s, dude, virtual reality was not just a technology, it was kind of a prophecy. And if you've been following the feed the last few weeks, you know we've been digging deep into the weird and wonderful Tokusatsu explosion that Saban unleashed on America. First, we kicked down the command center doors with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the color-coded phenomenon that made homework optional and martial arts mandatory. Then, we crawled through haunted mansions and comic book portals with the big bad Beetleborgs, the bug-armored fever dream powered entirely by tokusatsu chaos and Halloween energy. And now we're diving into the third pillar of that Saban Triforce, the one your brain remembers just enough to make you ask, wait a minute, did that show really happen? Yes, it did, and it slapped. We're talking VR Troopers. A show so gloriously, unapologetically 90s that it may as well have worn a backwards hat, carried a Tamagotchi, and told you about the dangers of cyberbullying well before cyberbullying even existed. You see, before Mark Zuckerberg rebranded the entire universe as Meta for tax purposes, virtual reality in the 90s was pure magic. Every magazine promised we'd all be battling digital monsters, doing school field trips inside computers, or at the very least, learning math with holograms. Enter Saban, king of adaptations, lord of repurposed footage. The man looked at Power Rangers' success and said, what if we do that again, but in a computer? Boom! VR Troopers was born. But here's the thing, and this is where the nerd historians lean in like I'm about to reveal where the Holy Grail is hidden. VR Troopers was not based on one Japanese show, it was based on three. Three different Metal Hero series: Metalder, Spielban, and Shaider, stitched together like a cybernetic Frankenstein. Meaning, every time the troopers powered up, Saban was basically duct taping three different universes, suit designs, color palettes, and special effects budgets into one episode. And you know what? It kinda worked. Like a smoothie made entirely of sparklers, karate, and leftover post-production assets. So let's set the scene. You're a kid in the 90s. You run home from school, drop your backpack, grab a fruit by the foot, and flip on the TV. Fox Kids comes on with that iconic metallic swoosh, and suddenly you're in Crossworld City, a place that looks like the Power Rangers Angel Grove if it had a Comp USA on every corner. Our heroes? Ryan Steele, the serious one, the chosen one, the mullet of destiny. Kaitlin Starr, photojournalist, responsible one, the I actually have a grown up job member of the team. JB Reese, the tech nerd, martial artist, and guy who always said something profound right before kicking a robot in the throat. Their hangout? A martial arts dojo run by Ryan's missing dad figure, Master Tao. Their enemy? Carl Zictor, a corporate overlord who transforms into Grimlord, a digital warlord from the virtual dimension. Tell me that isn't the most 90s sentence you have ever heard. A CEO who becomes Satan.exe? Brother, that's just Silicon Valley with extra steps. And Grimlord? Oh, bless him. He was a villain who did not just monologue. He monologued like he was getting paid per syllable. Whenever he transformed from Carl Zictor into his full digital tyrant form, he did more acting in 3 seconds than most Oscar nominees do in entire films. He'd grip the air, stare into the void, and scream, "I am Grimlord!" And then, boom, he'd become a cyborg demon overlord ruling a dimension made entirely of early 90s CGI. The virtual dungeon looked like someone fed a Doom 2 map through a blender made of computer parts. And it kinda ruled. It also gave me a migraine as a kid, but that's fine. That's the price of greatness. And real quick, let's bring back our favorite running joke, the Sentai versus Tokusatsu difference. Because VR Troopers is where this gag is gonna peak. You see, Super Sentai, Power Rangers source, is color-coded teamwork. Everyone matches, everyone is symmetrical, it's choreography, unity, and explosions that go off exactly when they are supposed to. But VR Troopers? VR Troopers is 100% pure Tokusatsu chaos. Tokusatsu is the parent genre. We strapped fireworks to this stuntman and really hope he survives kind of energy. Sentai is synchronized swimming. Toku is three dudes shoved into a monster suit falling over into gravel. VR Troopers was absolute peak Toku. And because Saban was stitching three different shows together, sometimes Ryan was fighting Metalder monsters in one dimension, Kaitlin was fighting Spielban villains in another, and JB was in an entirely different show altogether, punching Shaider robots. But the American script had to pretend they were all together, so the actors would stand side by side in the US footage, and then immediately cut to Ryan fighting alone in a quarry while the narrator yelled, "VR power!" I cannot express how funny this is when you rewatch it. It's tokusatsu magic held together with chewing gum, willpower, and Saban's checkbook. Everything about VR Troopers radiated 90s childhood energy. The neon hologram transformation sequences, the chrome reflective armor, the early CGI that looked like a screensaver had a nervous breakdown. The catchphrases like, "Trooper transform!" The fact that their powers were straight up taught by a dog. Wait, sorry, not the dog. That was Masked Rider. VR Troopers had the talking dog later. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. The point is, VR Troopers hit that perfect middle ground where martial arts shows were evolving from look how cool this is to look how digital this is. Kids in the 90s knew computers equaled the future. So, of course, a show promising armor, martial arts, and cyberspace battles felt like destiny. I remember walking through our local Toys R Us and seeing the VR Troopers action figures in the metallic packaging. That silver sheen that made every toy look 10 times cooler, and also a little radioactive. And I swear, the first time I held a Ryan Steele figure, I didn't just feel like a kid holding a toy. It almost felt like a kid holding the future, which, in retrospect, was probably the plastic fumes hitting me full force. But still, magic. VR Troopers was not just another Saban spinoff. It was kind of a snapshot of the early internet panic and digital fascination wrapped in karate, chrome, and the wildest editing choices of the decade. It took the teens with attitude formula and plugged it into the motherboard. It made virtual reality feel dangerous and heroic at the same time. And at the heart of it all was that lightning in a bottle 90s optimism. That feeling that technology would make us more, not less. Troopers, strap in. Because we're leaving Crossworld City and stepping into the place every 90s kid thought computers actually looked like on the inside. A digital nightmare built out of red lightning, floating polygons, and Windows 95 screensavers pushed to their absolute limits. Welcome to the virtual reality dimension, or as Grimlord lovingly calls it, my empire of digital doom. The moment you entered Grimlord's world, everything changed. The sky turned blood red, the ground became random metal grids, every background object looked like it belonged in a Radio Shack fever dream. And the soundtrack switched from martial arts synths to aggressive, your circuit board is haunted industrial beats. As kids, we assumed this was just what computers kind of looked like on the inside. Like if you shrunk down the way the Magic School Bus did and took a field trip into your family's gateway PC, Grimlord would be there waiting for you, monologuing loudly and rebooting the universe for dramatic effect. And honestly, we weren't really far off. My dad did yell at the computer the same way Grimlord yelled at his minions. So let's talk about Grimlord's goons. Fox Kids never prepared us for how uncomfortably weird some of these digital villains looked. This wasn't the polished, symmetrical Monsters of the Week roster we saw in Power Rangers. This was Tokusatsu at its most unhinged. Like if a robot museum and a dumpster full of battle armor had a baby. You had Skugs, the Chaos Gremlins of VR Troopers. Basically putty clones from Power Rangers, but with more we got these suits on sale at a warehouse liquidation energy. They showed up everywhere. Alleyways, parks, dojos, grocery stores, just harassing people like MLM reps selling knives. Combat Cyborgs, metal warriors with names like Tankotron, Terminatortron, Gelatinous Doom Machine. Not real, but spiritually accurate. Every monster looked like it weighed 200 pounds and smelled like burnt fireworks. And there were virtual monsters who looked like OSHA violations. Some of the villains were literal computer viruses given physical form. Others were robots shaped like medieval knights, beetles, or that one coworker who microwaves fish in the break room. We all have that one, right? And he's an absolute asshole. Every time Grimlord summoned a new creature, the show treated it like an event. Behold, my newest digital abomination. And then a monster would slowly walk on screen like, hey, sorry boss, I gotta warm up first. This suit weighs 40 pounds. And the transition from the real world into the VR world was top tier 90s cheese. The kids would shout, Trooper, transform! And suddenly, Ryan became a chrome-plated Metalder warrior. JB became a Charavan-esque armored knight. Kaitlin became a Spielban twin. Yes, there were two Kaitlins in Japanese footage, and the US show just rolled with it. And once inside the VR world, every single fight looked like a stuntman leaping over exploding cardboard rocks. Sparks flying off armor like someone hit them with a blowtorch. Monsters swinging giant weapons as if their joints needed WD-40. Mid-air flips that probably violated 3 California labor laws. It was kind of glorious. If Power Ranger fights were synchronized dance battles, VR Troopers fights were a dude sprinting through a gravel pit trying not to pass out inside a 60-pound rubber suit. That's Tokusatsu, baby. And here's where the chaos gets a little spicy. Because the show used footage from 3 separate Metal Hero series, each trooper basically fought in their own private universe. So in one episode, Ryan would be fighting in a foggy post-apocalyptic wasteland, JB would be battling in a desert quarry, and Kaitlin would be in a neon-lit scrapyard filled with glowing pipes. And the American script would still say, hang on, you two, I'm on my way. No, you're not, Ryan. You are 5,000 miles away in Metalder's world punching a refrigerator demon. Speaking of, this leads to my favorite VR Troopers phenomenon. The stand side by side but never fight together rule. The US actors would shoot scenes standing shoulder to shoulder, and then immediately all 3 would cut to completely unrelated Japanese fight footage. The show tried so hard to mask it. Split screens, quick cuts, lots of dialogue like, I'll take the left flank, and lasers to hide the mismatched backgrounds. But as kids, I don't think we really noticed. We thought it was intentional. We thought it was the style. We thought, yeah, of course they're all in different parts of cyberspace. That kind of checks out. The target audience was 6 to 12. Our critical thinking skills were maxed out by our Pokemon cards. So let's celebrate some of the weirdest, most wonderfully jonky parts of the VR Troopers experience. 1. 90 CGI that aged like milk left in a server room. Everything in the virtual world had that plasticky, low poly shimmer. It was like fighting evil inside of a Nintendo 64 boot up screen. 2. Grimlord's throne room looked like a Doom mod. If you told me Grimlord was rendered using a Voodoo 2 graphics card, I probably would have believed you. 3. Villains who couldn't move their necks. Half the monsters turned their entire upper torso just to look left. It gave off serious Tim Burton's Batman energy. 4. Kaitlin randomly having 2 armored forms. Because Spielban had 2 female heroes, and Saban said, kids won't notice. We didn't. We absolutely did not notice. 5. JB's finisher that cut monsters in half. JB was the only hero allowed to canonically slice villains clean in half. Power Rangers said, make sparks. VR Troopers said, make those funeral arrangements, bitch. From the virtual dungeon to the Skugs, the cyber monsters, the glitchy red sky dimension, none of it should have worked. But it did. Because VR Troopers had something special. That raw 90s sincerity that said kids deserve digital warriors who do roundhouse kicks in cyberspace. It was not polished. It wasn't perfect. But it was ambitious as all hell. And it carved out its own corner of the Saban verse by embracing that weirdness. But to truly understand why VR Troopers hit the way it did, we need to talk about the troopers themselves, their characters, their arcs, their powers, and the emotional core that kept this whole cyber experiment from collapsing. So fire up your hologram projector, adjust your VR headset that still smells faintly of plastic and regret. So let's break it down. Ryan Steele. He wasn't just the leader, he was the emotional anchor of the entire show. Ryan's whole deal was tragic hero energy. His arc? Ryan's father, Tyler Steele, disappeared years earlier, believed to be trapped inside the virtual reality dimension. That's right. While other kids were dealing with science homework and cafeteria lunches, Ryan was processing loss, responsibility, destiny, and becoming a literal cyber samurai. All before turning 18. Ryan was the quote-unquote chosen one, but not in a Power Rangers Zordon Pikachu kind of way. This was Tokusatsu chosen one energy, chaotic, mystical, and vaguely traumatic. And in true Toku fashion, Ryan solved problems with martial arts, had at least one dramatic monologue per episode, stared meaningfully into the distance whenever someone said, your father, punched so many robots that it should count as therapy. He was a king, a legend, a walking PSA about using martial arts responsibly. JB Reese, the smart one who solved everything. So if Ryan was the heart of the team, JB was the brains. He was the guy who knew how to hack a virtual dimension, how to fix a robot dog, how to do flying kicks in jeans, and how to deliver exposition while fighting Skugs. This man multitasked like a Best Buy employee on Black Friday. JB embodied a very specific 90s archetype, the tech-smart karate kid. You know the type, the kid who brings a laptop and nunchucks to school, just in case. His specialties? Laser lance, lightning saber slash. JB's finishing move was iconic. He straight up cut monsters in half like it was nothing. As kids, we didn't realize this was way darker than anything Power Rangers would ever do. This wasn't make sparks and flip. This was, I'm sending this robot to the Shadow Realm permanently. Virtual tech expertise. JB was the team's hacker. He'd type 4 words on a keyboard and suddenly he'd destabilize Grimlord's portal, decode an encrypted virus, locate Ryan's dad, or somehow order pizza, I assume. Every team needs the guy who stares at a screen and announces, "I've got something," even if that thing is absolute nonsense. Or a pizza. He was also the voice of reason, so while Ryan was brooding and Kaitlin was investigating, JB was the dude going, "Guys, please, you're going to get us killed." And he was right 90% of the time. He was also ignored 100% of the time. And that's completely relatable. And last, Kaitlin Starr, the most underrated 90s Toku hero. Kaitlin Starr does not get the credit she deserves. She was brave, smart, grounded, and the only member of the team with 1. A job, 2. A boss, 3. Deadlines, and a transformation sequence that sometimes cloned her into 2 simultaneous heroes. Yes, Kaitlin had 2 different armored forms depending on which footage they grabbed from Spielban. Saban saw this, and instead of panicking, they went, "Yeah, it looks fine. Kids will never notice." And we didn't. At all. Her role on the team? She investigated weird happenings, took photos of monsters nobody else believed existed, kept the boys from turning every fight into a demolition derby, pulled double duty as 2 Kaitlins when needed, and threw hands like she was owed overtime. She was the functional adult of the squad. And like every 90s girl boss icon, she had to deal with the boys making stupid decisions while she saved their lives. And just a real quick honorable mention, Jeb the talking dog. Because the 90s, it had zero chill. At some point in the writer's room, someone went, "Hey, what if the dog talked?" And instead of firing that person on spot, Saban said, "Promote this person." Jeb wasn't crucial to the plot. He didn't fight monsters, he didn't hack computers, but his presence screamed, "This is a 90s children's show and we have no idea what boundaries are." Sometimes he gave advice, and sometimes he provided comic relief, and sometimes he ate a sock. Honestly, that's icon energy. And let's not forget Master Tao, the dojo dad. Master Tao was the team's anchor in the real world. He ran the dojo like it was a cross between a martial arts academy and a community center, and he always had some bit of ancient wisdom ready when the plot needed a morale boost. He'd drop lines like, "A warrior's strength comes from balance. Try sweeping the leg less, JB." He gave Ryan the emotional support he needed, even though the man was constantly one speech away from breaking into tears over his missing dad. Master Tao was the uncle who's seen some shit character, and every hero team needs at least one. So let's talk about the Troopers as a team. The dynamic between Ryan, JB, and Kaitlin felt different from Power Rangers or Beetleborgs. They didn't have a Zordon, a Flabber, a comic shop, a haunted mansion, or Ernie's juice bar. They had a dojo, a newsroom, and a garage. They had jobs, they had responsibilities, they had monotone bosses who never noticed when their employees vanished for 7 straight hours to fight robot demons. The VR Troopers team wasn't just heroes. They were the busiest teenagers in Crossworld City. And every time something digital exploded, they were right back to training, studying, or submitting photos for publication deadlines. This gave the show a vibe that was different from other Saban stuff. It was more grounded, more serious, more, hey, we actually live here. Even if the virtual world made everything kind of look like Doom 2 with a mod pack. So now we've got our troopers, a brooding chosen one with a destiny, a tech genius with a sword problem, and a journalist who literally does the work of two people. These three were the backbone of the show, the human grounding beneath all the CGI, the monster suits, and the exploding gravel pits. But every good hero team needs good villains to push them to their limits. VR Troopers gave us a CEO who moonlighted as a demon warlord, a man whose job was evil businessman whose hobby was conquering all of cyberspace, and whose vibe was Elon Musk if he turned into a Final Fantasy boss. And when this man transformed into Grimlord, brother, we were cooking. So let's take a stroll through the glitchy halls of the virtual dungeon and meet the cyber creeps who made VR Troopers unforgettable. Up first, Carl Zichter, Grimlord. Carl Zichter was every 90s stereotype of a corrupt businessman. Greasy hair, suit that screamed, "I own rental properties!" Monologues delivered like he was auditioning for a Shakespeare play no one even asked for, and a corporate tower that was probably zoned illegally. But the second he stepped into his lightning chamber, he transformed, and not subtly, into Grimlord, a digital tyrant with glowing red eyes, a robotic face that looked welded together in the dark, ornamental armor stolen directly from a heavy metal album cover, and the acting style of a man who thought every syllable was his last. I am Grimlord. This man did not talk. He declared. He didn't command. He proclaimed. He was villainy incarnate. If villainy were running on a Pentium processor and overheating. Next, you've got the Skugs, the worst multi-level marketing team in history. Skugs were Grimlord's version of henchmen, VR Troopers' answer to putty patrollers. Except where putties had signature moves, menacing noises, and actual choreography, Skugs looked like someone bought a pallet of rubber suits at a Halloween store liquidation sale and said, "We'll take all of them." Their specialties included getting kicked, getting punched, getting thrown, getting kicked while being punched, exploding at mildly inconvenient times, and appearing in public parks to ruin people's picnics. You could not walk through Crossworld City without at least 3 Skugs asking if you had a moment to talk about their Lord and Savior Grimlord. And bless them, they never once won a fight. Not even one. They were the customer service reps of evil. Always available, never helpful. Now we get to the real meat and potatoes of Grimlord's empire, the Combat Cyborgs. These dudes were... Look, I don't know how else to say this. They looked like OSHA violations with legs. These weren't slick, Megazord-level monsters like on Power Rangers. These were raw, industrial, heavy suits built in the Japanese Metal Hero era where they ask, how many metal plates can we strap to a stunt guy before he dies? Some of the standouts? Decimator, Ryan's main rival. All black armor, sword fights. Pure samurai energy. He was the cool villain, the Vegeta of the series. If Vegeta had no facial expressions and clanked when he walked. Then there's Kongbot, a robot gorilla who looked like someone tried to reverse engineer Donkey Kong using car parts. And Spiderbot, half robot, half tarantula, all no thank you from me, please. Then Tankotron, a villain whose name alone tells you everything you will ever need to know about Tankotron. Tank, robot, probably misclassified as a residential vehicle. A literal computer virus shaped monster, because why the hell not? It's VR Troopers. We accept these things around here. And because these suits came from different Metal Hero shows, sometimes they didn't even look like they belonged to the same franchise. It was beautiful chaos, a monster mash that forgot to mash. And while Power Rangers villains operated out of moon palaces, ziggurats, and industrial warehouses, Grimlord's whole gimmick was a digital empire powered by very questionable computing practices. His virtual dungeon was basically a server room designed by a supervillain who had only ever seen computers in Radio Shack catalogs. Some rooms had giant CRT monitors stacked into pyramids, lightning arcs that served absolutely no purpose, floating polygons swirling like geometric ghosts, random pipes that nobody ever explained, and minions who stood around pressing buttons that definitely didn't do anything at all. It felt less like a lair and more like troubleshooting a Windows 95 machine that keeps blue screening because a demon installed himself as malware. But that's why a lot of us loved it. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't polished, it wasn't high tech like Batman Beyond. It was what a fourth grader seriously thought the internet looked like. And honestly, the fourth grader was right. And because cheap to produce equals television gold, Zictor also had human henchmen in the real world. A trio of corporate goons with all the subtlety of cartoon villains who didn't realize they were not animated. Their job? Sabotage Ryan's day, deliver exposition, pretend they were doing evil business things, and make Zictor look even more dramatic by comparison. Every time these three showed up, it felt like Grimlord hired interns from the Home Alone burglar school of acting. Marvelous. Truly marvelous. And Grimlord's empire was full of portals. Big, glowing, sometimes suspiciously sparkly wormholes that appeared whenever the script needed a dramatic entrance, a monster to escape, a trooper to get yeeted into cyberspace, or a random plot twist no one had prepared for. These portals weren't explained, but they kinda didn't need to be. It was the 90s. If you threw enough lightning at something, kids just accepted it as science. And here's the thing that makes Grimlord's forces so memorable. They were weird, but they were sincere. No irony, no self-awareness, no winking at the camera. Just fully committed villains, fully committed stunt performers, fully committed explosions, and fully committed nonsense. And that is the secret sauce of 90s tokusatsu adaptations. No matter how bizarre the design, no matter how janky the CGI, Grimlord's army always felt like they believed in their mission. Even if that mission was go stand in a quarry and then explode. So we've got our villains, an evil CEO turned cyber demon, legions of Skugs who existed solely to get bodied, and a rotating cast of monsters who looked like they were welded together in the dark by someone who used a fork as a soldering iron. But the real magic, the thing that kept VR Troopers from being just another tokusatsu remix, was how all of this existed alongside something every 90s kid remembers fondly. The toys, the merch, the marketing, the aisles of Toys R Us that hypnotized us like a siren call. So power up your Beetle Bonder. Sorry, wrong episode. And brace yourself for a nostalgia hit straight to your wallet. It's time to head back to Toys R Us and step into the true battleground of the 90s. The toy aisle. Specifically, that glowing stretch of real estate in our Toys R Us where every box was chrome, every package had lightning bolts on it, and every figure felt like a sacred relic forged in the fires of Fox Kids merchandising. And if VR Troopers ruled anywhere, if it left a mark anywhere, if it conquered any world, it was this one. This is the story of the merch war. and how VR Troopers tried to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Megazords, the Beetles, and every fluorescent green piece of plastic the 90s had to offer. Picture it. You're 9. Your mom takes you to Toys R Us. You're barely through the automatic doors when the smell hits you. That intoxicating blend of plastic, cardboard, and possibility, and the faint aroma of crushed dreams from parents who missed a Power Rangers shipment. And you make a left, then a right, past the bikes, past the Barbie aisle, until boom, the Saban section. Power Rangers for sure took up most of it. Multiple shelves, multiple rows, entire toy line ecosystems. But right beside the Power Rangers, tucked like a scrappy little brother trying to get into the group photo, VR Troopers. And their packaging, it slapped. Kenner produced the VR Troopers toys, and let me tell you, they did not phone this in. These figures had chrome armor, battle-damaged variants, laser weapons, flip head transformations just like the Power Ranger toys, articulation that felt advanced for its time, and packaging that looked like a rave inside a motherboard. The Ryan Steele figure? Man, that was a first-choice purchase. The JB figure with the red visor? Instant classic. Kaitlin's figure? Criminally underrated. Some of the best mold work in the entire line. And just like with Beetleborgs, Chrome equals better. Chrome equals cooler. Chrome equals your parents asking, why do all these toys look so expensive? As they toss another one into the cart because you begged like you were on death's door. And here's where it gets wild. Kenner released transforming figures. Toys where the troopers' human heads flipped into their armored forms. They were clunky, chunky, and absolutely magical. Each figure had a little gear mechanism in the back. Press the button, click clack, helmet snaps into place like a miniature morphing sequence. Did they break easily? Absolutely. Did we care? Hell no. Because for a brief, glorious moment, we had action figures with practical effects. That was our cinema. And if there's one thing the 90s toy industry understood, it's absolutely this. Kids will buy anything if it comes with wheels or wings. And so VR Troopers rolled out, pun intended, a fleet of toys: VR Turbocycle, VR Battlecruiser, Laser Lance Jet, Sky Trooper Glider. Did the vehicles actually appear in the show? Technically. Sometimes, kinda, sorta. But in the 90s, accuracy was completely optional. Coolness was the mandatory thing. And these toys delivered. Chrome accents? Check. Stickers that peeled off in a week? Check. Missiles that shot across the living room, hit the dog, and disappeared into a vent forever? Check and check. And to truly understand VR Troopers as a cultural phenomenon, you have to talk about the video games. There were 2 major releases. On the Sega Genesis, you had VR Troopers, a side-scrolling beat-em-up inspired by Streets of Rage, Power Rangers, and probably the developer's lunch break. This game looked like it was coded on 3 hours of sleep and a bag of Doritos. Sprites? Huge. Enemy variety? Absolutely questionable. Music? Banger. Difficulty? Impossible unless you were a gifted child or had a Game Genie. On the Game Gear, also VR Troopers. A miracle this even ran on that hardware to begin with. The fights were slow, clunky, and somehow still kind of fun because every move sounded like a microwave starting up. You weren't playing for the mechanics, you were playing because, yes, I get to be Ryan Steele. And that was a powerful sentence to a kid in 1995. And VR Troopers had VHS releases, single or double episode tapes with big bold titles like VR Troopers, The Battle Begins, Grimlord's Revenge, Crossworld City Under Attack. Each one had purple borders, tech grid backgrounds, and covers featuring Photoshop work that definitely violated at least 3 design principles. But again, did us 90s kids care? Absolutely not. These VHS tapes lived right on the shelf, right next to our copies of Power Rangers, The Day of the Dumpster, and The Land Before Time 2 through, what are they at now, 47? And they were absolutely cherished. And if you were really in the trenches, you might have owned VR Troopers lunchboxes, VR Troopers backpacks, pajamas, trading cards, birthday party plates, Halloween costumes made of plastic that cracked instantly, VR Troopers AM radio walkie-talkies, VR Troopers pencil cases, VR Troopers underwear. Not that I'm confirming or denying anything. I had Power Rangers underwear. In the 90s, everything became merch, and VR Troopers honestly had some of the coolest aesthetics on store shelves. That cyber metallic vibe was chef's kiss. You see, VR Troopers had the perfect storm. Chrome armor, heavy design cues, digital themed packaging, martial arts appeal, and less saturation than Power Rangers. It was almost the cooler, edgier alternative, like the older sibling who listens to heavy metal and rides a skateboard. And because VR Troopers didn't last as long as Power Rangers, the toy lines became rare, collectible, even kind of mythical. Some kids only knew the merch and not the show. And that is peak 90s culture. The merch mattered because for a lot of us, VR Troopers wasn't just a show. It was a feeling we carried home in plastic. A hero on your nightstand, a chrome figure you held in your hands, a piece of Crossworld City living in your toy box. And as much as the digital battles shaped the vibe of VR Troopers, the emotional core, the story threads, the relationships, the arcs, that's what gave this show longevity in our memories. So let's crack into the narrative heart of the whole show. Ryan Steele wasn't your typical 90s hero. Sure, he threw kicks like his shoes were allergic to the ground. Sure, he posed in front of explosions like he got paid per pivot. But his story? That was heavy. Like I mentioned in the opening, his dad, Tyler Steele, disappeared years earlier while doing research on virtual reality technology. Everyone assumed he was dead. Everyone, except our hero, Ryan. He carried that weight everywhere he went, in every fight, in every transformation, in every brooding moment where the camera lingered on him staring into the distance like he was filming an after-school special. And the writers did not treat it like a plot gimmick. They made it the spine of the whole show. Because in the virtual world, Ryan would see glimpses, shadows, clues, echoes of his father's voice. Sometimes a monster would taunt him with the truth. Sometimes Grimlord would dangle answers just out of reach. They turned the hero's journey into a digital scavenger hunt for family. So if Power Rangers taught us teamwork, and Beetleborgs taught us wish fulfillment, VR Troopers taught longing. And that's why Ryan's story sticks. It wasn't about being chosen. It was about choosing to keep looking. Even when everything felt impossible. Even when the world, virtual or otherwise, glitched around him. And that hit different as a kid. It hits different now. And what made this trio so good was not that they fought together, because let's be honest, they usually didn't thanks to the editing situation. But what made them good was how they lifted each other up. Every time Ryan's emotions flared, JB was the stabilizer. He'd say stuff like, "Ryan, this could be a trap. We need to think this through. My dude, please stop sprinting into digital dimensions without telling me." He wasn't just the tech brain, he was the team anchor. The "if nobody else has a plan, I'm gonna figure it out" guy. And Kaitlin's whole vibe was, "I'll do it myself." Investigating monsters alone? Sure. Jumping into the VR world knowing she might glitch out of existence? Fine. Covering for both boys when they ran off mid-conversation to go fight code demons? Her specialty. She provided emotional ballast, a grounding energy that Power Rangers didn't really have at the time. If Ryan was the heart and JB the brain, Kaitlin was the spine, the structure, the support beam. And even though the footage forced her to double as two different armored forms, she handled it like a champ. And Jeb the dog was comic relief, sure, but he also had an emotional job. He was the audience's voice. When Ryan was spiraling, Jeb would comfort him. When JB was panicking about a virus outbreak, Jeb would crack a joke that broke the tension. When Kaitlin was juggling fear and responsibility, Jeb was there being supportive, paws on her lap. It was weird, it was goofy, and it was very 90s. But in the grand scheme of the show, it worked. He was the connective tissue that kept the tone from collapsing into melodrama. And sometimes the wisest character in the room was the one licking peanut butter off of his own paws. And Master Tao was not just a mentor. He was the emotional guardian of Crossworld City. He gave advice, structure, purpose, discipline, and that low-key, "I know you're superheroes, but I won't say it out loud" energy. He was to VR Troopers what Uncle Iroh is to Avatar. Calm, wise, tired, and trying his best. He didn't have superpowers. He didn't fight alongside them in VR. But he gave them something much, much more important. A home. A place to belong. A place to return to after battling digital monsters that wanted to delete reality. That dojo wasn't just a set. It was the heart of the show. A sanctuary, a grounding point. Beetleborgs had the Haunted Mansion or Boom Comics. Power Rangers had the Command Center or Ernie's Juice Bar. VR Troopers had the dojo. And emotionally, that's the most relatable of the three. And each episode followed a pattern: normal teen life, Grimlord scheme, portal glitch, virtual battle, real world fallout, emotional recovery. But because the emotional beats mattered, you didn't feel that formula. You felt the growth. Every episode chipped away at the mystery of Ryan's father. Every episode deepened the bond between the trio. And every episode hinted at the bigger world of VR, the danger lurking behind the digital veil. Yes, the fights were awesome, and the suits were shiny. The explosions rearranged our childhood brain chemistry. But the heart? That's what stuck. VR Troopers wasn't trying to be cool, although it did a damn good job. It was teaching kids loyalty, bravery, responsibility, emotional resilience, processing grief, dealing with mystery, confronting fear, and navigating a world that doesn't always make sense, real or otherwise. For a show made from borrowed footage and 90s optimism, that's pretty damn impressive. You don't remember VR Troopers because of the CGI, or the Skugs, or the virtual quarries. You remember it because watching those kids stand up against something bigger than themselves felt like you could stand up to something bigger too. The suits were chrome, but the emotions were absolutely real. And that's why it endures to today. We've explored the villains, the monsters, the toys, the digital landscapes, and the emotional architecture holding it all together. So now, it's time to hit the big one. The legacy, where VR Troopers stands today. what it left behind, what it taught us, and why, even though it did not last as long as Mighty Morphin Power Rangers or the Big Bad Beetleborgs, it hit just as hard, and maybe even harder, for the kids who rode the virtual wave. VR Troopers didn't last long, just 2 seasons, 90 some odd episodes if you count the split parters and production oddities. And then poof, gone. No big finale, no Trooper transform one last time, no closure. Just one day, Fox Kids moved on. But that doesn't mean the story ended, because VR Troopers left something behind. Something more lasting than it ever got credit for. You see, VR Troopers is one of those shows where the absence of a grand ending almost made the nostalgia stronger. Because it didn't finish, it just stopped. And as kids, that does something. It leaves a little unresolved file floating in the background of your brain. A to be continued that never comes. For years, you really don't think about it. Then one day you stumble across a clip online, or you see a cosplay, or you find a battered action figure in a bin at a flea market, and suddenly you remember, oh shit, the digital kids in chrome armor, VR Troopers, I love that show. That's its legacy. A glitch that never quite cleared from the system. Rewatching VR Troopers today is like opening a time capsule of 90s optimism. Virtual reality was going to be the future. Martial arts solved everything. Monsters exploded cleanly. The internet wasn't terrifying yet. Chrome made toys look 10 times cooler. And we truly believed technology would make life magical. And the show, it freezes that moment in amber. It's the 90s saying we don't understand how computers work, but we're going to kick evil in the motherboard anyway. There's a kind of purity to that kind of storytelling, a sincerity we really don't see often anymore, where nothing is too silly, too earnest, or too ambitious to try. Even mistakes feel charming. Even glitches feel human. Because humans made this by hand with rubber suits, pyrotechnics, spliced footage, and sheer determination. VR Troopers was not sleek. It wasn't polished. But it was real. And sometimes, real trumps perfect. So real quick, let's talk fandom. For a show that ended quietly, VR Troopers somehow still hangs on in the collective nerd memory like a ghost in the machine. You see it in convention cosplays, retro toy collectors, niche YouTube retrospectives, TikTok edits, random, hey, who remembers this posts, the Shout Factory DVD drops, and the occasional person who yells, Trooper Transform! Into the void. It never became a household name, but it did become a cult badge of honor. The kind of show where if someone mentions it in public, 3 people are more than likely going to turn around and go, Bro, you remember VR Troopers? It's a handshake, a decoder ring, a glitch you recognize in someone else's nostalgia database. TV people, effects artists, editors, writers, a lot of creatives today can trace their inspiration back to this era. Power Rangers lit the fuse. Beetleborgs loaded the cannon. But VR Troopers taught a generation of kids that blending footage is a thing. Editing can hide miracles. Practical suit design absolutely matters. And visual effects don't have to be perfect to be absolutely badass. And you can tell a sincere emotional story inside absolute chaos. It showed that a show doesn't need a blockbuster budget to connect. Just a whole lot of heart, a lot of effort, and just a little bit of imagination. That's Tokusatsu soul. And VR Troopers had it in spades. So let's be honest. If VR Troopers dropped in 2025, it would rule. The premise, it's timeless. The style, retro cool. The tech, finally able to do what the 90s dreamed of. Imagine it. AR transformations, glitchy digital monsters, a cyberpunk dojo, drone shot fight sequences, Kaitlin live streaming investigations, JB hacking Grimlord in real time, Ryan searching for his father across the metaverse. It kind of practically writes itself. We could still get that reboot. And I'd lose my mind if it dropped. But here's what it all comes down to, at least for me. VR Troopers, like so many 90s shows, wasn't just about the monsters or the suits or the tech. It was about believing the world was bigger than you could see. That there were hidden realms, unseen dangers, secret battles happening just outside your field of vision. That kids could be heroes. That loss did not define you. That friendship steadies you. That courage matters. That even glitchy worlds can be worth saving. And that someday, you might discover your dad is trapped in the virtual dimension, and you might have to save him. The emotions were simple. The execution was messy. But it was real, and it stuck with a lot of us. VR Troopers didn't glitch out of existence. It just logged off for a while. And sometimes, revisiting it now feels like logging back in. And that, my friends, is VR Troopers. A cyber samurai anomaly. A chrome age fever dream. A glitch in the nostalgia matrix. And a show that deserved way more credit than it ever got. If you grew up shouting, "Trooper, transform!" in your living room, you're home here. If this was your first time diving back into Crossworld City, welcome to the virtual dojo. And now, as always, time for those shoutouts. To My Player 2, thank you for still cheering me on like you're in my corner of the VR dimension. To Cap, you would have absolutely been the JB of our squad, tech skills and all. To my brother Ian, always holding down the fort, you are the master Tao of my life, keeping balance, keeping pace. And to Pickle, you would have joined Grimlord for the snacks and then immediately sabotaged his entire evil plans by accident. And to Ripley, the patron saint of the Nerdcast, my best girl, chasing Skugs across the digital plane and keeping watch over every late night edit. And to you, the listener, the retro warrior, the nostalgic heart who keeps this whole crazy thing going. Thank you for being here, for remembering, for sharing, for laughing, for transforming with me. If you dug this trip back into cyberspace, do me a solid. Please drop a 5-star rating, share it with your nostalgia squad, tell a friend who owned a Chrome action figure, or hit me with your favorite VR Troopers memory. The lobby's always open. Stay gold, nerd bold, and remember, if a businessman starts yelling about conquering the virtual world, maybe don't step into his lightning chamber. I'll catch you on the next one.
Game over.